Have you ever wondered why prophetic people have the ability to be extremely accurate one day and completely off another? How people who can peer into a person's life with extreme detail can miss grander or what some would consider simpler details in another situation. Oftentimes, this brings about criticism, as it should, because it's a very confusing and harmful thing to witness someone who is supposedly speaking on behalf of God be inaccurate. It is also damaging to the person that publicly released an inaccurate word. It's messy all around. But why does this actually happen? What's really going on? In this session, I want to talk to you about prophetic blind spots. So, what is a prophetic blind spot? They are areas where the person doesn't allow spirit to speak to them clearly. These are the restricted areas of the mind. These are the filtered areas of the mind where the information doesn't come through clear if it comes through at all. Now, understand this: everyone has the ability to speak to and hear from the royal family. The problem is never their willingness to communicate with us, but rather our openness to receive from them. And sadly, most people believe that they're open. But I want to talk about two blind spots. So I want to help y'all out, especially if you want to know why you're struggling to hear. These two blind spots are one, the other, or both that you're likely dealing with. So these two blind spots that I believe are the most common are fear and pride. Both of these can cause a person to distort what they're receiving or shut themselves off completely. This is because they both have a way of altering perception. Fear says things like, God doesn't want to talk to me. What if God is mad at me? What are they going to say to me? They won't speak to me that clearly. How do I know it's God and not a demon? Fear moves you into pessimism. It thinks about all the worst things that could happen should you move in that direction or open yourself up in that way. Pride, on the other hand, moves you into isolation. So this pops up commonly in the areas that make you say, I don't need to ask God about that. I have a degree in X, Y, and Z. This is obvious. This is common sense. Pride can also sound like, God led me to this system, so I'm going to trust the system as if it's God. I'm too mature for God to talk to me about that. I can handle this on my own. I heard someone else prophesy about it, so I'm going to take it as is. God hasn't told me that yet, so it must not be true. And that one is usually coupled by, if God wanted me to know, he would tell me himself. God doesn't need you or anything else. God could just speak to me whenever. I don't need nothing else. And lastly, at least in these examples, it's God doesn't care about that. See, both paths lead to confusion, distortion, and fruitlessness. You will find that people who get caught in either direction will have a hard time manifesting or really walking out the supernatural. They might find themselves knowledgeable in, or even throw themselves into devotion, but won't actually see the works of Christ manifesting in their life. So I want you to understand this. The prophetic flourishes in intimacy. The royal family will never push you away in order to mature you, especially knowing that you don't know what you're doing yet. They also love you more than you love yourself. This is why they make themselves so available. See, the mind that is busy, uninterested, and ruled by either fear or ego during the day usually experiences divine communication via dreams, visions, and synchronicities, or guesswork. This isn't heaven limiting its communication with you, but instead using the only streams available. Pretty much saying, hey, you won't talk to me directly, so I have to talk to you indirectly. This is the royal family. This is the heaven saying, hey, you won't pick up the phone. You don't answer the door when I come, so I'm emailing you. I'm texting you. So this shows their posture of extending themselves to us. It reminds me of that famous picture of God and Adam they have, where Adam's laying back with his arm like this, and they have God with his arm stretched down for Adam. They notice that if you look at the fingers, it has God's finger, his hand fully extended, reaching out, and then it has Adam's finger limp, showing that he's not actually trying. It's a similar picture. So they're always extending themselves to us. They're not trying to make us earn them. They already love us. They already embrace us. They are already welcoming us. So understand this. They believe in maturity, but many confuse maturity with neglect. They believe in teamwork. They're not trying, they want you to do this with them. They're trying to help you. They want you to hear from them more than you want to or think you're ready to. They believe in you more than you believe in yourself, which means the issue is the beliefs that are in the way. Either it's leaning towards fear or it's leaning towards pride. And for many, it's both. These are easy pitfalls to fall into. So my homework for you is to ask yourself these questions. What do I think I know that is preventing me from being completely open and hearing from or experiencing the royal family clearly? What lies am I believing that are hindering my connection with Elohim? What questions am I afraid to ask? Who told me that I couldn't hear from them directly? As you find answers to these questions, you'll find your blind spots, and this will open you up to clearer, direct communication with the royal family. If you ever feel like they aren't talking to me, it's likely either because of fear or pride. So tell me in the comments, which of these two do you struggle with? Is it pride? Is it fear? Is it a little bit of both? Tell me a story. I want to hear from y'all. Tell me about a time where you realized that there was a belief in the way of your connection. Now, I'll tell y'all some stories. So there's a millionaire that I met a few years back named Ray Higdon. And he talked about this in one of his lectures. He was new to Christianity. He was new to spirituality. He was new to the supernatural. He was new to the kingdom. He's still new. I think he was like a new Christian convert, kingdom convert, when around the time I had first met him. So I'm meeting him in like within a year of his conversion, let's say. So this is him as a baby, what people would consider a baby. But in that little bit of time, he developed an audible relationship with the royal family. And he talked about how he didn't have a problem hearing from them. Then he admitted that there were moments of inaccuracy that made him sit back and reassess. He said, this is wrong. Something's wrong if I'm hearing them so clearly, and then I'm still getting stuff wrong sometimes, and I'm saying God said on top of it. Something's up. I need to handle this. And he noticed that he only missed prophetic words in a specific area, and that area was finance. So he realized that it was his own ego saying, I already understand this. I don't need God's help with this. That was his blind spot. That was the area where he thought he knew it enough to not need God's help. So I'll give you a few examples from my life, one from my ego and one from fear. So if you notice, I don't call Yeshua Jesus. I say Yeshua instead of Jesus. There's a reason behind that. Because years ago, if you read some of my old posts on Patreon, maybe even on Facebook, if you can find them, even some of my really old teachings, you'll find that I would say their names interchangeably. Because at that time, I believed he doesn't care. It's just a translation issue. This is my ego story, right? So I used to tell people, it doesn't matter. It's just English versus Hebrew. Who cares? I was arrogant about it. And then I realized one day, I said, you know what? I've never asked him myself, Let me ask him to see what his actual perspective is. I don't think he cares. So when I asked him, I actually asked him with a smug attitude, thinking I had the answer already. So I'm like, so do you care if we call what name do you want to be called? And he shocked me because he said Yeshua. I was stunned. He said Yeshua because it's my name. I said, whoa, wait. You mean like a lot of thoughts started racing? I'm like, so Jesus isn't your name? Why do you answer to Jesus if it's not your name? You've been answering me knowing that why did you let me call you that? For, my mind went into a bunch of stuff, but his answer remained the same. That was an area where I thought for him, I made up feelings for him that he doesn't care. It wasn't until I humbled myself enough to ask that I got an answer, which goes into something that I see a lot of people do. Where if they don't have a revelation on something, they have this misconception that the royal family is just going to come to them and drop the information in their lap. That's pride pretending to be maturity. I've had arguments with leaders over the years along the same lines of, oh, Yeshua taught me this. He ain't never taught me that. And then I'd say, have you asked? And they say, no, I ain't got to ask. And there we have a battle over ego because they just believe the information was supposed to come to them. They didn't ask. And this is a story of me pretty much doing the same thing. I didn't think he cared. So I used to tell people he didn't care. It doesn't matter, just pick one. And then I asked, and then after a while, I ended up meeting some people who had the same type of relationship as myself. They were hearing clearly, and they all told stories of having the exact same encounter where they asked them finally. They said, hey, what's your name? Or, hey, what name do you want to be called? And we're shocked when he said Yeshua instead of Jesus, which throws out all the other arguments. Well, what about Yehoshua? What about Yahweh? What about this? That's the name he said. Not just to me, but to pretty much everyone that's asked him. So that's one story. That's my ego story. The next, and you'll actually hear me say this in some of my teachings from just a few years ago. And this is the story of Yahweh versus El. As a researcher, you don't research as much as I do and not bump into certain ideas and certain thoughts. And I'd heard people say, I'd bumped across the idea that said that El and Yahweh might not be the same God. They could be the same person. They could not be the same person. So that was an area where I intentionally avoided. I told the royal family directly. I said, hey, I don't want to know. I don't want to know because I was afraid. This is my fear story. I was afraid of what happens on the other side. I was afraid of the information on the other side of that question. For me, it was chaos. I was like, if they're the same person, fine. If not, what am I going to do? Now I have to research all this other stuff. Now I have to come to terms with my beliefs, my foundation, being attacked on that level. So I was afraid of that question. And then I remember one day, this is Holy Spirit, this is Mother messing with me. One day I asked her a question. I asked Holy Spirit a question along the lines of the question. It was around it. I was like, it was pretty much in the posture of, don't answer this, but kind of touch one of them. It was I did that. It was like a half and half, 50-50 nervous question. Like, don't tell me, but show me a little bit. It's the best way I can describe it. Because it was like I asked a question and then I realized that my question was too close to what I kept telling them I didn't want to hear about. And I remember I didn't even audibly hear back. I just felt her presence get really strong on one of the answers. And I was like, wait a minute, you just told me the answer. And then I heard her laughing at me. I'm like, okay, so fine. Yahweh and El are different people. Great. Now, if you notice in my book, Fullness, I don't talk about that in this book. is because I didn't have this experience until after that book was written, because I did not want to know. And then you can actually see the timeline of my teachings from when I was refusing to know, and when I finally knew, I started opening up a lot more, not just about the structure of the royal family, but also the heavens, reality, multiple religions, multiple cultures. And I'm like, this is what I was afraid of on the other side. I can say that there's peace in knowing, there's peace in truth, there's protection in truth and light. What I found out is that I was simply afraid of trusting them that far, just to keep it honest, right? Because I can cover it in a bunch of lingo and make it about the theology and the backlash. But if you know me as much as I know myself, I've never cared about backlash, which is why I teach what I teach. My DMs are still filled with your pastors telling me they love what I teach. They just are afraid to teach it. I've never cared about backlash. So I can't say it's the backlash. I was afraid, if I was to put words to it, I was afraid that the royal family was going to show me something about them that could possibly make me not like them as much anymore. That could shatter the love that I have for them, the stability of what I already had. Because keep in mind, at this point, I've already done, I want to say 8 dead raisings. I'd already been going into the heavens. I already had face-to-face relationship with them. I was afraid that I was going to learn something that would make me throw that away. Instead, truth set me free. And I ended up learning stuff that put them in better perspective so that I could love them back better and demonstrate better. The quality of miracles only went up. The quality of healings only went up. My prophetic flow only got better. The way that I loved other people, strategy, skill, everything got better once I stopped being afraid of them. Like I said, this is my fear story. It was in theology. So it's before you listen to some of my Q&As, I'm like, ooh, that's a question I don't answer. Now I have the empire of El, I have the economy of El, I have all of these things talking about the structure of the heavens and all the different members of the royal family. I go in depth these days because I'm beyond fear. These revelations weren't being hidden from me. I was resisting them. It's taking responsibility over the situation. So people do that in many facets. They decide for the royal family what they believe is true without ever asking them. So for those of you with preconceived notions about them, my question is, did they tell you that, or did you read that? You came to that on your own? Who told you they didn't care? Was it them? If they said they didn't care about something, then they don't care. But if someone told you that, or you just came to that on your own, oh, God's so big and focused on other stuff, they couldn't possibly care about X, Y, and Z. That's pride. Some people cling to what they know is familiar. Some people cling to Jesus not because they know it's true, but because it's familiar. It gives them something to hold on to. In a world that's always expanding, they feel like they're losing the last thing left that's keeping them stable. So it's a threat to stability. It's a threat to control. People have different reasons for why they do what they do. But I'll tell y'all this, the best thing that I ever did was start over. This was in 2020, because I realized that there were things that I was teaching that I couldn't say God told me after the end of it or before it. That it was things that I had read, things that I had picked up from, things that I had heard in sermons and lectures and whatever else, things that I had picked up that I believed it made sense, but I could never actually say God told me that that was true. And I started over. I said, you know what? I'm only going to keep the things that I heard them give to me directly or confirm. The things that they said, yeah, that's true. Or they just sat down and we had a conversation about some things. Everything else I'm throwing away, which was 99% of my world. So I remember at this time, still being a Christian, still being at church, they would ask me questions about the Bible, simple things, stuff we learned in Sunday school as kids. Hey, how many sons did Adam and Eve have that were named? And I said, I don't know. They said, what you mean you don't know? I said, I don't know. They say the Bible says Cain, Abel, and then eventually Seth. I'm like, I read that too, but I don't know. Maybe, maybe something was lost in translation. Maybe there was a fourth son that we just don't know his name. I don't know. I don't know what actually happened. That bothered them, but that was I was clinging to integrity because I like being credible. I like to be able to tell people, God told me this, and no, God told me this, and be able to tell them, if you don't believe me, you can ask them yourself. They'll tell you the same thing. That doesn't happen anymore if I just start sharing stuff that I believe is true. I respect my credibility too much. So I started over. I tossed out everything. Not physically, I didn't have a book burning, but in my soul, in my mind, I said, if they never said it to me, I'll sit it on the back burner of things that might be true until we get around to that. And I just started asking them questions about things. I'm like, so how does this work? So how does that work? So how does this work? How does that work? So tell me about this. Tell me about that. And I would just take whatever they were sharing with me at face value, because I believe if there's anyone that can be trusted, it's them. We're dealing with something that's omniscient, meaning it knows everything, something that's all loving, which means it loves me. It's right. You're dealing with the very spirits and the very essences of truth. They're right. I humbled myself. I said, there's no fact checking I can do that makes you wrong. You created all of existence. You are the very essence of, what do I look like saying, prove it to me? No, you're right. So after doing that for months and months and months, I would eventually bump into some things while I was reading, because I'm a nerd. I like to read. I was reading for fun. Sometimes I teach things and people say, where'd you get that from? I don't remember, because I was reading for fun, not to teach. I ended up teaching and y'all are experiencing my memory on a lot of things. But I remember as I started reading books, I would come across things where I'm like, oh, well, y'all told me that. Or I'd be listening to lectures and they'd say, okay, archaeologists studied this and they deciphered it and it actually says this. I'm like, oh, well, you told me that. That's how I know that's true. Instead of this is right because it's provable, it's no, this is right because truth said it was true. I changed my stance with all of that. But that was the best thing that I ever did. I started over. I put my pride aside and I accepted a simple truth. This truth might set you free. I said we're all wrong already. So the only thing that we can do now is become more right. I'm going to set aside all the things I don't know about. I'm going to cling to what I know, which are the things that they told me directly. Everything else, I'll consider it a maybe, and I'm going to move forward. I'm just going to intentionally have conversations and learn as I go. So I've been relearning everything since 2020. So people ask me, wow, how did you find this out? You must have been around before. You must have had a bunch of past lives who were wise. You must have this and that. Oh, you must have been gifted. I'm like, no, I surrendered. I decided that I wasn't the expert. I decided that I didn't know everything. And I chose the royal family as a credible source in my book. So I want to give you some other truths. I want you to receive these. Might help you to say them over yourself, but receive these truths. Hearing from the royal family is easy. There is no pressure to perform. I don't have to earn their voice or be good enough to hear from them. They aren't hiding from me. I don't have a blockage, nor do I need an impartation in order to hear. I already have access. So, for those of you who are actually prophets, you know that you're prophets. That's a calling that Christ gave you. I actually have a School of the Prophets course available on my website that'll actually help you understand your calling and give you keys to cultivation specific to you. So if you're a prophet or looking for mentorship in that area, you can sign up for this self-paced course at caveofmystery.org. It's my website. For the rest of you, there are other resources available on the website that you may be interested in. But y'all, that's it for this session. I love y'all. Be blessed.